I'm Rob from Barefoot Gaming, and today we review Tainted Fate in virtual reality. Let's start at the beginning. What is Tainted Fate? So you start off, you are a demon operating out of hell, and you have got a boring, monotonous job of lopping people's heads off. Really quickly, however, you are summoned into the mortal plane, where these monks, or these priests, or these cultists, let's say, have a totally different plan for you. Now, as their plan tries to unfold, you kind of break that up right from the get-go, and you kind of start doing your own thing. While that's happening, you also find out that you have enemies that you have in hell that are going to make things a little bit more difficult. So you don't just have demons to contend with, you'll have like some kind of weird beasts and different kind of hell spawn. That's the basic gist of the story. Next up would be, what kind of movement does this support? So this supports standing, supports seated, supports room scale. The movement is based all around teleportation. There is no free movement in this game, so you point where you want to go. The paths laid out for you are very linear in this game, so you don't really have to worry about getting lost. The only thing you're going to really run into is locked areas, and generally they are glowing rocks, and I will touch on that in a moment. So let's talk combat. Now, in the combat, you can grab your enemies, you can tear them apart. If you grab their head and their body and pull it apart, or if you grab like a leg and their body, you can pull it off. As long as you tear something off of the body, it will generally die. There's magic, which you can either summon your own demons, or you can summon this little scorpion looking thing which will blow up those glowing areas that I told you about before. And to choose what it is that you're going to be summoning, what your magic ability is, you swipe left and right either on the trackpad, or you use the joystick on the Rift, or on your Windows Mixed Reality set, and that will make your hands glow a different color. They'll look totally different, and that means you're using that power. So there is no heads-up display. If you run across an enemy that doesn't know you're there, you can teleport directly into them, and then they explode, in which case they leave some organs behind, which you can eat. So speaking of eating, so you can get your health back and such, if you find goats, you tear their heads off, you eat their head. If you find chickens, for whatever reason, you just eat the whole chicken and you get some health back. And if you find organs, either hearts, intestines, anything laying on the ground, either from you killing something or just because it's there, you would grab it and you just pick it up and put it towards your mouth and you eat it. So I think I mentioned this, but let's be clear, this is on the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift, and Windows Mixed Reality, so it supports all three. Having gone through that entire list, this game does not take itself very seriously. Kind of touched on that before, but it is quite profane. There will be some swearing in here, so depending on your age, this may not be appropriate. Aside from that, it's just your typical move from point A to point B. If you can't get there, then try a different route. Now, I think I've touched on all the mechanics. I'm going to get to the actual review. Now, as per some viewer requests, I did some digging here, and it says on their page that this thing is in early access for between 2 and 6 months. So this game is early access right now, and you'll know that right away because there are only 2 bosses in the game, and when you get to the second boss, there's a big placeholder over top of him saying that this is going to be a much more epic fight, and it's really a nothing at that point. He's kind of a placeholder, and I'll probably touch on that at the very end of this. On to the review. This is $15 US. I'm just going to throw out pros, I'm going to throw out cons, I will give you my honest impression of what this game is. Now, something that really stood out for me is the game looks alright. The graphics aren't subpar, it's in line with what you would see in VR, so you wouldn't know this is made by a small studio by the models that are attacking you. However, the background is kind of blah. And the number of enemies, the number of different types of enemies you're going to run into are very limited. So there's like 2 different models of inmates, there's I think 2 different models of demons, then there's the little scorpion things which you can learn to spawn yourself very shortly. There's the 2 bosses, like it's really limited as to how much stuff you're able to fight. There's the cultists, which will either just stand there, or if they're within range, they'll fire their magic at you. Their magic is range limited, so if you're too far away, they can't hit you anyway. But for me, something that really stands out is this game is repetitive, and I always feel bad ripping on a game made by indies. I feel bad ripping on any game, but this game is really repetitive. When I saw the gameplay trailer where you see your ability to tear people's heads off, that's the only way you can kill people really, aside from teleporting into them, is to rip their heads off, and that's fun for like 2 minutes. But when the only way you can kill something is grabbing its body, grabbing its head, and tearing it off, or if it's a human, you can grab a leg or an arm or tear it off. And the grabbing detection areas aren't so great, so that can be frustrating as well, but it gets boring really, really quick. And I found that after kind of my 5-minute mark in this game, it was easier to find an edge and just grab people and just toss them off. Because the fighting isn't fun. I just kind of wanted to get into the gameplay. The problem is, that kind of is the gameplay. The gameplay is based around the fighting. And if the fighting isn't interesting, that's kind of a pretty big negative. A very linear path, which, you know, again, it's a smaller studio, so I don't expect them to have a great big open world, but the locations are very, very small. And it's frustrating. They do things like, you'll be walking down a path and then, for example, a tree falls across it. So you can't get past the tree, even though you can teleport. Even though you can tear people in half, if there's any wood blocking your way, you can't get through it. However, you'll notice there's going to be fight music, and that means there's going to be enemies. So you have to find them, because often they're not going to find you. The AI will be running up against a rock or up against a boulder. And I know that's something they could work out because this is early access, but I found it very frustrating having to find the enemies I had to kill on the level to kill so that the music stopped, meaning that the tree moved or that the wood disappeared or whatever happened so that I could keep playing. Now, I mentioned that there are 2 bosses, and the first boss you run into really got my hopes up on the game because I had felt bored up until I got there, and then I'm like, holy smokes, this is a really big boss and he's really interesting looking, and he spits these scorpion things at you like they're eggs, and you pick them up and throw it back at him and they blow up in his face. So it escalates. So he'll throw 2 of them at you at once, but the fight isn't interesting. All that epicness, and all he does is toss little eggs at you that'll blow up if you wait too long. The last boss is not finished. They made that very clear, which is a very good thing because I teleported by his feet. I took one of my explosive things, dropped it there, blew up, and he just leaned forward. And that was it. I'm assuming end of game because I couldn't do anything else. So that's a placeholder. I'll give them a pass on that. You cannot beat this game as it is right now. It took me a little less than 2 hours to go through the entire game, and the entire 2 hours I felt bored. I don't know how they can fix that with fixing the AI. I don't know how they can fix that just by making the final boss interesting, making that an interesting fight. Everything up until then feels monotonous. And if I made this game, I would be super proud of it. If this was my first game I ever made, then fantastic. You have to learn somewhere, but at their asking price, at their $15 US, which isn't a lot of money, I can't recommend it. Again, I feel bad. I give this a 1.5 out of 5. It's not like it's not functional. It's not like it's all broken to bits. You can play through it right to the boss, but it's boring. And that's it. That's my review. I'm sorry, developers. Fans, thank you for watching. It always makes me feel empty inside after I do a review of a game that looks good and leaves me flat. But that's it. That's the review. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, comment, share. You guys are awesome. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you again real soon. See ya.